Okay, all you have to do is basically read the headlines if you don't have time to really spend delving into each story. Look in the center section. Under the Japan nuclear disaster featured story box, you'll find a stream of material moving around the clock. And then below that is the Fukushima radiation in the U.S. and Canada box, and it's all right there. There is a lot going on, and it is going to, as I say, stay that way from now on. There's a story in the radiation box, which I want to thank our next guest for contributing to the world. He, of course, Michael Collins. It was in the Ventura County newspaper. Don't know what the name of it is now, the Reporter. And it's called A Radioactive Nightmare. As fallout from Fukushima heads our way and continues to head our way, the government turns a blind eye. They do nothing. They're not going to do anything either. And something that I think was first mentioned on this program is a key to understanding the nature of how some of this radioactivity will be spread all along the west coast of North America. And that is the action of the waves. The spray, the foam, the microdroplets, the aerosolized moisture from the ocean constantly churning in the shore break. And in those microdroplets will be radioactivity to one degree or another. We do know now that the radiation moving across the Pacific from Japan, from west to east and east to west ultimately, is not good. It's not diluting. The solution is not dilution because it doesn't work. The radioactive waters tend to hang together. They found this out on a number of different occasions. You won't find many stories about it, but it's true. TEPCO is now admitting for the last couple of months that they're dumping 1,000 tons of radioactive, highly radioactive water into the ocean every day from the site. God only knows how much they dumped before they began to admit that they were dumping 1,000 tons a day, and that may be conservative by half. Who knows? Michael Collins, hello, welcome back.
Hey there. Thank you. And the Ventura County Reporter newspaper really should be given credit because we managed to get in a lot of the stuff we've talked about, but stuff that just hasn't made the print media in the United States.
You know, I remember, Michael, I remember on this program, and I think it was with you, and I raised the issue. Another means of pollution along the shore that nobody thinks about is inhalation, and it comes from the microdroplets, the moisture that the churning waves constantly generate. And now, you know, you've studied this. There have been studies in Europe where it moves in a couple hundred kilometers if the conditions are favorable. But I think it was right here on this program that subject was first broached.
Absolutely. And look how important it is. And if people could just imagine this. If you can smell the sea, you can smell the sea breeze you're heading out to the beach.
What are you smelling? You're smelling exactly what I mentioned and what we're talking about.
That's right, except that salt attached to water vapor that you're smelling is about 4 to 5 times the size of something that normally a water vaporized droplet can carry, if you can believe that. About 4 to 5 times its actual usual weight carry. But what that means is this. It means that radiation in the water, which tends to congregate on the surface, gets up in that mist as well. Jeff's absolutely right. Go down to any bay, go down to the ocean. You can see the hanging mist over it. You can smell it. And it's headed our way. You know, this paper was, I can't give them enough credit. No, they've had a pretty storied history. It was 10 years ago this year that they published a story of mine that led to the creation of a park where they were going to, a big developer was going to build about 3,000 homes. Now, I'm not against development, just that there were pollution problems at this place. Mm-hmm. Because it's next to the old Rocketdyne site, just like that other development, Runkle Canyon, that I've been reporting about, that they're still fighting about the development of, is next to Rocketdyne.
So but you've been at this a long time then about Rocketdyne. I didn't know that. You stopped a 3,000 home development. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Well, this paper, this paper published a cover story in December of 2002 called Rocketdyne Ranch about a proposed Washington Mutual development called Amundsen Ranch. Beautiful place. You've seen it in tons of movies, combat.
I remember that story now, the Amundsen Ranch. Yes.
And it all collapsed because I questioned what was in the groundwater. They tested the groundwater. They found the rocket fuel oxidizer perchlorate, which is what's called a precursor chemical. It moves very quickly through groundwater. It says there's more goo to come, and it's most likely from that place right over there where they fired off 30,000 rockets in testing over decades at the Santa Susana Field Lab and used a lot of perchlorate. So this paper took that story and really ran with it. And the result was something very good for the public. Now, look what they've done here. Same thing. When I look over, in preparing for talking about this tonight, figuring this would come up, and people can see this. It's linked on Jeff's site right down the middle. It's on our site. Easy to get to. The amount of information that we got into a piece like this, we went real long with it. We were real strict on facts. It's astonishing. And this is a community that's right on the ocean. Now, people ask me, is it time to duck and cover by the shoreline yet? I say the numbers don't bear it out yet. And the fact is, while there's no way around it, the way these currents work and the Kuroshio current works, even though it's 70 miles wide, it's like Jeff said, that stuff hangs together and it splits as it reaches North America and heads north towards Alaska and south towards Southern California.
Yeah, it moves 10 feet a second, too. The thing moves.
10 feet a second. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, the readings aren't showing it yet. We're definitely detecting what we think is from that mechanism, sea spray. We also think there's another mechanism in play, Jeff, but we're going to write about that first. But you're going to be the first to know about it because we were the first ones to talk about the sea mist here. What we do, Denise and I are delighted that the Los Angeles Kings are now the Stanley Cup World Champions. I know we got a lot of hockey fans in the audience, a lot of people from Canada.
John Barber must be elated, our friend.
Yeah, and it's most unexpected, I would imagine, to the rest of the hockey world. Denise and I like to skate. We do long-distance inline skating, and some of the best skating is down on the bike path right by the sea. Do we do it now? Yes, and I'll tell you why. Compared to what's coming, this is nothing.
Right. These are the good old days right now.
Exactly. So make good use of them. People say, oh, come on, you think that stuff can get over here? What about that pier that washed up on that coast there in Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. So we were able to get a lot of information that I think always bears repeating. Fact is, a University of Davis study
UC
out
Davis.
The mechanism of what happens when all that water hits all that molten core and cools off those messed up spent fuel pond rods. What happens to that water? Well, it turns into peroxide, and it creates these things called buckyballs, which are uranium-60 little nano cages shaped sort of like an English Association football, and they can transport the majority of what that fuel is. It's uranium based. It can transport it. These heavy elements, which would generally sink in water, it makes it lighter because it spreads out the area that these 60 combination of any combination you can come up with mathematically of uranium isotopes in this little nano cage. And the University of Davis found that after 258 days of testing these things and having them, that their intensity of ionization hadn't decreased, Jeff, hadn't decreased at all. So we know what happens to that water. We know about the current. And we also know about, the fact is they go right up the coast of Japan and they head off east, headed right towards us, 10 feet a second, carrying that garbage patch the size of Texas.
Yeah, 75 miles a day. figure it that way.
So, I mean, let me tell you, that it is so dire in terms of people's slack-jawed response to this.
I
know a lot of people have detectors. Keep an eye out for this stuff. Don't ever put yourself in harm's way. And if you pick up anything, have gloves on. But, if stuff is coming as big as the pier, there's other stuff. And what do we have down here? We have a very powerful group in Southern California. It's done a lot of good, called Heal the Bay. It is the...
Oh, yeah, the Santa Monica folks.
That's right.
Yeah.
They put out a information about the meltdowns and possible debris, and I've never seen anybody poo-poo it more than these folks.
Good for them. Good for them. Good. I'm sure they recognize your work too. You're leading the way.
No. You misunderstood me. They totally blew it off and misrepresented the
No, that's not. They can't be that bad. Come on. Really?
Oh, yeah.
This is supposed to be an environmental group. What did they go?
Outrageous.
Were they wait a minute. Were they penetrated? Who took them over? I can't believe they wouldn't recognize your work, even in passing.
Think again.
Oh, well, that's a bad. That augurs very poorly for the future.
The scary part. They've just volunteered to pick up all that debris in L.A. as it comes ashore. That's just terrific. This is the group that wrote, and I called them on it, and I had a back and forth with their media department, and they in saccharine tones, very patronizing tones, told me to, take a walk. And it's unbelievable to me.
Well, let him pick the stuff up.
Oh yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
This isn't Michael. I was saying, look.
Nobody knows how to pick it up. You guys do.
You go right. Be my guest. There is no one else in this country who is doing more publicly in a journalistic sense than you and Denise in viralreporter.com. And for that group, which in the old days did some good environmental work, as I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Going back 20, 25 years, as I think. For them to treat you like this or to treat the subject like this suggests to me that they really they have nothing left. There's nothing there. It's a joke. It's some public relations outfit.
Avoid is a bad thing. If you're walking up some stairs and it's kind of steep and suddenly the next step's not there and you step off into Nowhereville, that's not good. But you might see it. With something like this, where it proactively will say, you know what, we'll take care of that. Now you're going to take care of it because it's unsightly, perhaps. And of course, what makes the news down here is worry about invasive species. Big article came out worrying about invasive species. All that stuff with the barnacles stuck to it, coming all the way from Japan, and
starfish.
What does it do to us? Yeah. You know what the invasive species is? It's a form of human that has no brains left because they refuse to see that the thing invading is it's destroying the ecosystem. It's in the very essence of this planet. It's in its water. It's coming right at us. And either the people that have any sway on any level are incompetent when it comes to this, or they're actively hostile and they're in it for something real bad, or a combination. None of this gives one faith in humankind to right this ship, but at least we get to talk about it, which has been very important.
Well, unless we talk, there's nothing. And they would this is all mind-boggling to me, how people just don't want to know. And they're also deprived of the right to know by the controlled so-called media. But when you have environmental groups like this turning their back on hard science, which is what this really is, radioactivity is radioactivity. And what do they need to know? The tuna from last August? No one's even testing the tuna from now, and they should be. The EPA is doing nothing. Nobody's doing anything, and yet UC Berkeley has admitted, among others, that pine needles, soil, all up and down the West Coast are showing signs of cesium. And they don't remember that last March and early April, Vermont dairy cattle in at least one farm were showing radioactive cesium in their milk. How did the dairy cows get hold of cesium all the way in Vermont? Well, why did the European Union issue a warning that young children, older senior citizens, and pregnant women should stop eating all leafy green vegetables, especially the darker ones like spinach? They issued that warning early last fall, but no one remembers. So the time issue is something that the controllers, play perfectly. Short attention span. I think at the end of 5 days, 98% to 99% of what you studied or read is lost to you. So time. They know. They've got computer models that show these things, how long a fact or a factoid or an awareness aspect will remain in a populace. They know it all. Anyway.
They absolutely know that, and they play that. And what we have a problem in terms of this disaster, if you don't have somebody actively activating or acting for the public, like going out and finding the goo and telling you about it, we're in trouble. If it's left to a few reporters, that's really troubling. But my dealings with a lot of the personnel in environmental agencies here in the United States on various issues has been appalling, because they can't all be corrupt, with quotes around it. There are other motivations for lack of performance for the people, lack of advocating for the people, being straight with the people, doing a good job, actually affecting change that will benefit the public. That you go home and maybe your wallet's not as thick as you could make it, but you have that satisfaction of doing something for folks. Here we're in a situation where it's coming in. We just had the Canadian government ditch their ability to test the Pacific and the Atlantic for contaminants on, they just got rid of a whole division and its equipment. And you got to wonder, wait a second. We've talked about, people look at you askew if you talk about this. It's like, listen, wasn't that over a year ago? Aren't you done with that yet? Aren't you happy you got your garage full of, lima beans? Why don't you leave it alone? Let me tell you something, folks. And I know the people listening to this show know this, is that we are talking about the real deal. We're talking about a planet killer, and it's self-induced and people embracing ignorance and stupidity and prejudice against the fact that can't possibly be so. How could something so awful happen? These folks are guilty of, we're going to be writing about this in the future, but it infuriates me as a person, but it does give me hope when you see something like this newspaper coverage. 10 years ago, this paper took on Amundsen Ranch and actually got enough information out there. This is before EnviroReporter.com, that place now is a huge park. And so things can happen and happen well, but it all comes back around to what are we going to do?
It's a huge park. That's nice. What's it called? Perchloride Park?
Perchloride Park. Well, actually, what I believe really kind of made the folks who were behind the development nervous beyond the perchlorate was the trichloroethylene, because perchlorate's a rocket fuel oxidizer. You see it in fireworks, you see it in road flares. It's very polluting, but it's nothing like trichloroethylene, which is in abundance at the Santa Susana Field Laboratory next to Amundsen Ranch, next to Runkle Canyon, which has had a detection, or 4 detections of trichloroethylene in a well that we've talked about that the developer claims doesn't have tanks there, but actually does. Trichloroethylene, I believe, the fear of it coming under the Amundsen Ranch development eventually in a plume was, I believe, a deciding factor in thinking about, maybe we don't want to build this, because TCE, trichloroethylene, it vaporizes, and it can be way down in the ground, Jeff, and it will vaporize all the way up, and it'll vaporize into your house, and it will collect. And even at tiny,
It's like radon, same thing.
Yeah, tiny, minute amounts, it will kill you. It's carcinogenic, so I'm not saying it will kill you in tiny amounts like it's cyanide, but it is something that used to be in every dad's garage. It used as a solvent in the aerospace industry when you fire
Well, this
off
is like
rockets.
carbon tetrachloride. It was a common dry cleaning agent that used to be used all the time, and it's ultra deadly stuff. Many things.
You know, there's perchloroethylene, which is a cousin or the little sister of trichloroethylene. It was used and is still used in dry cleaning. And that is also a volatile organic compound. And we have hundreds of sites throughout California that used to have dry cleaning establishments or still have them. And they have PCE contamination underneath them. You know, there's so much chemical and radiological stuff that we're exposed to, but not so much on the radiological side. That's where Fukushima distinguishes itself. This one's bringing the load. But we get exposed to all sorts of chemicals, and they even have an Academy Awards for chemicals, if you can believe this, and it's coming up this month. It's called the Toxie, and they give out awards for the worst bad actor chemicals, and it's a riot.
Where is it? Where is this going to be presented?
It's going to be in the Silent Movie Theater on June 24th.
Are you involved with this?
Well, Denise is one of the Toxie.
Oh, I get it.
Fracking chemical cocktail. And if you go to Toxies.com, Toxies, you will see fracking chemical cocktail, and tell me if she don't make a fine poison.
You're bad. All right. Thank you, Michael. We're going to break here. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you next week.
You bet. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Michael Collins, EnviroReporter.com for real-time Southern California, LA area radioactivity readings, isotopes. Check it out, and lots of other very important information. Back in a minute. All right, let's go over there and talk to Yoishi Shimatsu, who is a remarkable resource of wisdom and perspective on this unfolding and intensifying catastrophe. Hello, Yoichi. How are you?
Okay, as okay can be nowadays.
All things considered. Yep.
Big controversy now is that it's been going on. It's nothing new, but it's getting hotter as they get closer to trying to reopen these reactors in Fukui, in the Oi nuclear plant. And there's a lot of opposition there, and a lot of it's not really being reported. It has been reported that 70% of the residents are opposed to reopening these nuclear plants. The government is just dead set to press ahead. Both the economy minister and the prime minister Noda himself have put everything on the line. The National Industrial and Nuclear Safety Agency gave an all clear signal, assuming they've run some of the stress tests there on the seismic. The Oi plant sits right next to a major fault line.
Right.
Okay, and in
don't they all?
1948, there was a larger than 7.1 earthquake there. So it does sit on a fault line, and it's also surrounded by other nuclear plants in Fukui province. Now, one of the problems that's not really mentioned in the press is that these nuclear plants provide power to the cities of Osaka and also the ancient capital of Kyoto. And Kyoto, a very beautiful, historic, ancient city, more than 1,000 years old. And the American military, in fact, the Department of Defense during World War II, did not bomb Kyoto. They realized the cultural significance of it, and in a sense, it's a city even older than Dresden. Dresden was bombed by the British, cultural capital of Eastern Germany,
Right.
but Kyoto was spared bombing because of historical, of the historical heritage there. Some of the stuff very, very priceless things from China, Iran, 1,000 years ago, that's preserved only there. So destruction of Kyoto would be a terrible loss to the world's cultural heritage. And these plants in Fukui are sort of like on a straight line. It's like Lake Biwa, which is like a very, it's a very low-lying lake between that plant and the city of Kyoto. And the radiation, if there is a leak there, would not only hit Kyoto, it would move into Osaka, Japan's second largest city. And so it would be very devastating. And the vast majority of residents and the government of Kyoto, which is the main consumer of that electricity, opposes the restart of these nuclear reactors. So what the government is thinking is really not clear. On whose interest are they doing this? When if the city, the major users of this power, feel that it's inadvisable, it's too risky to start them up, given the Fukushima experience. So, very undemocratic government, the nuclear authority, running as something higher above the law, above democracy, again, here again, and very great concern. So many citizens from Kyoto and Osaka had gone out there to protest. So it's a major movement. And again, one accident in the area could affect it, because the nuclear plants are very crowded. And when I was at the Japan Times, I was often writing editorials about how dangerous these plants are, because they're on the Japan Sea. It's very, very easy for saboteurs to come in from, let's say, if there were hostilities with North Korea. They don't need nuclear missiles. They just send a few guys in to knock out a few pumps there at any of these plants, and the whole area would be so radioactive, and it would just sweep across, cut Japan in half. So very, very dangerous situation. The government has been just pursuing a policy of total folly, of just suicidal policy, which they're now trying to get back to right now.
How can they get away with it? How can the Japanese people, now seeing massive declines in health and health indicators when they can get good data, how can they allow... what you say is, I'm sure, true. There is a lot more demonstration against the reopening. And if they reopen one, they'll reopen another one, and another one, and another one. That's the game.
Right. Yeah, and the problem is this plant supposedly passed the stress test, but the other plants are still undergoing studies. The other ones are very complicated fault lines, and they really don't know what the parameters are for a stress test. So this, I think, is very, very, is very foolhardy to open one plant in a region in where the stress tests have not been conducted on the other 4 plants in the area. So this is really ridiculous. And one of them is this plutonium breeder reactor, a reactor that makes more plutonium than it consumes. The Monju reactor
it's
sits
crazy.
on top of something like 5 or 6 fault lines. So this is raw plutonium inside this stuff. This is really, whoever designed these things, and then
are these Mark One GE?
Out of their minds,
Are these Mark One, more Mark Ones? Are they different? Do we know?
I think these are newer plants. These are much more newer plants, mostly Westinghouse plants. So they're built by Westinghouse. The American reactors. There's of course Japanese reactors there too. So it's GE controls the northern Japan. Westinghouse has a southern Japan market, or the western Japan market, and the northeast, the more populous northeast, is with GE, contracts with GE. So that's how it divides up. So there's American involvement there. So it's a very serious situation that they're pushing ahead without all the stress tests coming in, without a lot of seismic information just not available. The region Niigata, a little bit further to the north, that's been rocked by huge earthquakes a couple of times within 15 years, which knocked out the nuclear plant there, which we suspect is leaking, is still leaking, based on findings in nearby Yamagata. It apparently has been leaking recently. So situation is really pretty insane. And the Japanese public is sort of consigned itself to spending this very long, hot summer without a lot of air conditioning, shutting things down. The country is deindustrializing, so there's less and less. The economy is not doing well. Exports are down in Europe and the United States. There's been a few quarters now in which the economy is in a negative territory. So in terms of exports versus imports, so therefore there doesn't seem to be a real pressing need for nuclear power, other than to, let's say, save the nuclear industry, prove to the Japanese people that the nuclear industry is safe. Seems to be a very high risk PR exercise, which is pretty crazy. And the other thing is, the proof in the pudding is that the U.S. military is gradually pulling out of Japan. Their people have suffered exposure. They know that. Marine helicopters, you remember when Fukushima blew, they were 300 kilometers off the shore of Japan. That's quite more than 200 miles away when they had to turn tail and go back to the round.
They had to change course on 2 different occasions. By the way, they found cesium-134, 137, 450 kilometers away from Fukushima now in Japan.
Yeah, no, not surprising. Not surprising. Not surprising. Yeah. There'll be high. There's high amounts of that, and how far the uranium plutonium has spread is another question. And there's some confusion on this so-called black dust. You have to understand the Japanese word for dust is very inexact.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay? That's not dust. It's a bacterium.
Well, no, there's two things going on. The stuff that's blowing around, blowing around.
Okay.
People see things that are blowing around. That is fragmented, granulated fuel rods that haven't melted down but have been lifted into the high atmosphere. They're suddenly cooled, fragmented, comes down as dust, and that stuff blows around. That's just raw.
So that's actually particulated fuel rod. Huh.
That's right. The other stuff that is not mobile, immobilized on the roads, particularly on the roads, and I'll explain what that is. That's an alkali-tolerant bacteria. You'll find this black bacteria all along the coastal regions of Asia, all the way from Vietnam all the way up to Japan, Hong Kong, China, all along the coastal areas. It usually grows on the side of buildings that are not painted, on the concrete. So it's alkali tolerant, and it draws the salt from the calcium, the salt in the concrete, and it will take pollution, let's say automobile pollution, organic pollution basically, and it'll process that and feed on that. It'll grow outward into large sort of circles and large, blobs, so to speak. But the center will start to die out. As there's radiation in the air, or very toxic heavy metals in the air, the centers will die out, and it'll just regenerate on the edges and keep spreading out. Now, this stuff is growing on the roads in Japan because asphalt roads, which is very interesting because it normally goes in concrete, because what we discussed earlier, the nuclear material comes down as a salt, an alkali salt, forms the crust on the ground. So this bacteria, which also is in symbiosis with some fungi, which help, which feed, they sort of basically feed and transfer minerals between each other, enzymes. It will then settle on this alkali layer and then collect the salt. And then roadways are very good because there's a lot of automobile pollution, emissions containing the organic compounds that it needs. That stuff is immobilized and is growing in splotches all over northern Japan. So there's two types of substances here. And some people thought that, well, does this stuff really eat radioactive material? No, it does not. It needs chemically the salt, from the alkali salt, but it accumulates. It'll just tend to gather any kind of fallout that comes, and it'll trap the radiation. So and the radiation, it does not affect radioactive decay at all. There's no influence at all. And it itself will be killed by it, but it will just basically spread out, spawn, make more spores and move out and keep building outward in like a coral circle. So it's creating little hot spots on the roads. That's what it's doing, With the radiation, instead of washing off, this stuff will trap it and it will make hot spots, which would be, much higher. And that's why people are finding high doses, high levels of radiation doses in this stuff, because it is trapping these salts, but it does not consume, it does not destroy the radioactive material. The radioactive material just continues as is, just more concentrated appear in these black spots. Okay, so those are the two types of black material. And the word the word for dust, according in Japanese, is very inexact. And
I see.
It sort of takes in everything. Okay.
Interesting. All right. Well, that clears that up. I tried to make that obvious with a story or two, but okay.
The other problem we've had, just as a minor point in passing, is that UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, has just come out last week and said that the leading killers of children around the world are pneumonia and diarrhea. Exactly what we were talking about the WHO
that's right.
cover-up. They're going to attribute all the deaths of the children in Fukushima, northern Japan, to these two problems. And just to take apart UNICEF for putting out such a really low sort of, a really despicable kind of lie, is that, the pneumonia and diarrhea, the pneumonia arises because they're weakened by diarrhea. Where does the diarrhea come from? I'll tell you in two words: powdered milk. Okay? Either the water that they mix into the powdered milk is contaminated, not properly boiled, has a lot of heavy metals, or has lead or other kinds, of material in it, bacteria and so on. But the milk itself, powdered milk, basically doesn't really contain natural calcium. And a lot of the milk, both inside the United States and the United States and Canada exports, is mineralized calcium, which is indigestible for children. It destroys their kidneys. Okay? So this is the problem. The kids in a weakened condition in these, third world countries, on a poor diet, many of them suffering from on the edge of malnutrition, are taking in powdered milk with very dodgy water and mineralized calcium, which they cannot digest and which is harming their kidneys.
Correct.
And so therefore, they're getting weaker and weaker, and they'll suffer diarrhea from the bacteria.
Right. Of course. Well, they know now that
and eventually they'll be killed off by pneumonia. So the UNICEF is really out of line not to talk about these background factors, the real causes of the so-called causes. Okay, and this is really, and the timing of this again suggests that the UN, and it seems that more and more agencies are in on this collusive cover-up. Okay. And we have to really draw some conclusion about the UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon. What is he about now? Is he so anti-Japanese that he wants to just commit a genocide against the Japanese? There is, I have very close friends.
That's a very strange thing to consider. Okay, yeah.
Among the Chinese Cantonese population in Hong Kong, very close friends of mine, is that, there's many people in Hong Kong who feel the Japanese deserve what they get for World War II. Okay? And many people are celebrating the fact that Fukushima blew up and is going to kill off all the Japanese. So there is this undertone of a reverse racism there among some Asians, Koreans, and some Chinese who were victims of the war. Japan was not right by any means on every level. There were many victims of the war, but it was carried this grudge. This is really a kind of an inhumane grudge against victims, people who did not participate in the war, which occurred, 70, 80 years ago, okay? So this is really, and I got to wonder if the UN Secretary General isn't carrying a chip on his shoulder against the people of Japan, a very murderous, genocidal chip on his shoulder.
That's a big statement. Could be. Yeah,
it's a big statement, but you got to understand what kind of Secretary General would endorse a cover-up of something this threatening to one nation, and which now is spilling over to everyone else, including Korea, okay? Including Korea, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Your people are not going to be spared either. You'll die with us, okay? Do you hear that, Mr. UN Secretary General? So anyway, that is, you've got to wonder what is the kind of psychology among these top world leaders.
Well, they're not. See, they're but Yoichi,
what is on their mind?
Yeah. This guy is not. This guy is not a leader. He's a flunky, but he's obviously doing something on. He's doing something on his own here, which does reflect a real deep psychopathy of hate. Something's wrong with this. That's really you've nailed it.
Something wrong with the guy. Like these policies that he's spinning out are so unjust, unfair, biased, and he's not looking at facts. He's making these broad, sweeping conclusions about entire nations. That, without looking at the details, and the devil's in the details. We've got to look at these things when you talk about human rights or anything like. Where are the human rights for the Japanese people, you just, everything is gone with a broad brush, and who does it help? Who benefits except the major corporations, the major transnationals, who are just ripping, who cause this economic disaster for the rest of the world. Anyway, another problem here. I know it's cover-ups. This is the season of cover-ups. Leon Panetta, head of the Pentagon, former head of CIA, was in Asia, Singapore, giving a speech on how the United States is going to transfer most of its 60% of its military forces into the Pacific. But what he's not saying is that forces from Japan and South Korea are being pulled down into Southeast Asia, into the South Pacific, into Guam, Tinian Island, the new base there.
Are the Americans pulling troops out quietly of South Korea now?
Yeah. There's a drawdown of forces, which the current government in Korea is a little bit worried about. Yeah.
All right.
They're quietly pulling out Marines out of Northeast Asia, putting them into Guam, Tinian, and agents of the Pentagon are trying to get new base leases, either on a part-time basis or permanent basis. They will serve a secret mission to Thailand to get a major base for the U.S. Navy there. And then also there, an American general requested permission for NASA to do chemtrail spraying over Thailand. Okay? Chemtrail spraying, because what's happening is if you look at the pattern of U.S. bases, okay, they tried to build one down in Chile. Now that we've seen radiation flowing down there, they're less enthusiastic about South America since Fukushima, and now they're trying to concentrate in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia, out of harm's way of the Fukushima radiation. The chemtrails will be, I guess, some sort of shield against Fukushima radiation coming in. And the reason is not to save their men so much as to save their equipment. The USS Ronald Reagan, one of the finest, newest aircraft carriers in the American fleet, largest carrier, is used right now only to ferry automobiles. For,
now, wait a minute. Hold on. That's a very interesting statement. You mentioned it once before. The USS Ronald Reagan is carrying automobiles.
Yeah, on its top deck.
Okay? Now let me ask you this: what does that tell us about the decontamination, the successful decontamination of that aircraft carrier?
Very difficult in the ventilation system, and the other problem is once radiation gets into the jet engine intakes, okay, it'll affect the electronics. So if you're flying at supersonic speeds and you have radiation inside your electronic systems, anything can happen, okay? Things are going to go haywire. It'll disrupt your electronic signals. It will, cause sorts of interruptions. So they cannot afford for these, F-16s, F-18s to be, just basically falling out of the sky because there's radiation, there's particles of radiation inside. So they're looking
but
for
you're saying,
parking lot for their equipment, and Southeast Asia seems to be placed. Even Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, they're looking for a massive base in Vietnam, Thailand. Even Myanmar, they're making some tentative. India, so all near the equator as far as possible from the path of the Fukushima radiation. They're less enthusiastic about Australia. So basically, what's happening, and on the Atlantic side, the ships are all heading into the Mediterranean, as you know, the Persian Gulf, and the Indian Ocean. So in the event of a major once reactor 4 goes down, they'll probably move all those ships into the Indian Ocean. So basically, America will be stripped of its military defense. And I was wondering, why cannot they assign a few, minesweepers off the Pacific coast of Alaska, Oregon, to prevent this, potentially threatening float zone from hitting the shores? And we've seen, chemical pollution, but who knows? If there's a boat there, it might be radioactive. We don't know. Pieces of Fukushima the plant were ripped away by the tsunami. Electrical gear and all, which can float. We just don't know what is coming. Why is the military not doing this task?
They're doing nothing.
Which is written in the Constitution of
that's right.
civil defense of
that's
the United States.
That's right. They have
state or that thing, but of the entire nation.
I'll bet
the Constitution. That's why the military was created. Jobs to protect the country when it goes beyond the realm of one state.
I will bet the Navy has scores of minesweepers in mothballs that they could pull out.
Yeah. Plenty. Coast Guard. I mean, but nothing's being used on the coast, and things are coming in. No one knows. And then you do radiation readings on the beach. And so far, luckily, none of the pieces of the Fukushima plant have yet to come
to be
over.
hot.
We do not know.
Mm-hmm. Well, the fish are in.
We just don't know what is coming over. But there's some safety in prevention, and there's no prevention.
Of course. Now the other issue of prevention: no one's testing the fish, Yoichi. Nobody. They tested the tuna, which were caught last August. They're not testing any current fish that are being taken. One professor the other day said nothing should be taken from the Pacific Ocean with confidence anymore. Nothing by way of food.
No. This is what I've been arguing. We saw last week this whole shoal of sardines washing up on Chiba. This is where I was. Remember, I was the last summer I was doing radiation readings, trying to figure out the current, what's going on, how the stuff is killing the sea life. I was out there by the ocean doing measurements of the water and all that, and trying to examine the currents and looking at all the charts out there, which are available by the sea. And it just fits the class. What I was saying back then. There's spawning grounds outside in the month late June. Is when all the new, sardines are coming up. They spawn. They've eaten all this radioactive algae. They come into the coast. The cold currents are down below. Okay, they're pushed below the warm current. So they go down, eat some of the algae, and do the bottom, fishing down there, and they die. They float up, they wash up, and they die. It's happening by the day.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Okay, very good.
All right, good night. Yoichi Shimatsu. And the situation will be continually covered at Rense.com. We've been covering it since the day it happened, March 11, 2011, and we'll stay right on top of it for all of you who care. See you tomorrow.